Harold Hap Whitaker rose before dawn, the same way he had for 6 decades, ferrying his coffee mug across cracked linoleum toward the porch that faced his Kansas fields. That morning, however, the hush was broken by a strained whimper threading through the thin mist. He froze, mug suspended, and listened. Another whimper, like a rusty hinge dipped in sorrow, floated up from beyond the barn. Hap set his coffee down, grabbed the denim jacket he'd sworn still smelled of his late wife's apple soap, and trudged through dew-soaked grass. Near the split-rail fence lay a heap of matted fur. A dog, ribs sharp as winter cattails, flanks speckled in dried blood, paws curled inward as if praying. Its chest fluttered unevenly. Hap's own heart cramped at the memory of Maggie, the border collie who'd herded his children, now grown and gone, away from ditches and into laughter. He knelt. The dog's eyes cracked open, amber shards framed by pain. "Easy now," Hap murmured, letting his voice steady the desperate air. The dog tried to rise, failed, and slumped back with a muffled yelp. Hap slid hands under the trembling torso, warm blood seeped through worn flannel. He lifted with a grunt, sensing shattered trust more than shattered bone, and began the slow walk to his farmhouse, every step echoing a promise he hadn't known he was ready to make.
The kitchen became an emergency ward. Hap spread a threadbare quilt on the floor and laid the animal atop it. Under brighter light, the injuries became awful mosaics, a jagged tear along the shoulder, bite marks near the hind legs, coyote maybe, or barbed wire after a desperate scramble. He fetched the rusted tackle box that doubled as a vet kit, hydrogen peroxide, butterfly bandages, shears dulled by time. The dog's eyes tracked each instrument, but never growled, a soldier too exhausted to fear the enemy. Hap cleaned wounds with hands that once repaired tractors, stitched split hides, and once, trembling, buttoned his wife's final dress for burial. The dog whined but did not snap. "You're a tough old stray," he whispered, "but don't be tougher than me." When the worst of the bleeding slowed, Hap wrapped the dog in the quilt, propped a space heater nearby, and called Dr. Lawson, the only vet within 30 miles. Voicemail. At 83, Hap's patience outweighed his frustration. He left a calm message and returned to the quilt. The dog slept, light, twitchy breaths for 10 minutes, then jerked awake as if chased by the nightmare that had been real life yesterday. Hap lay down beside him, hand draped over busted ribs in a clumsy imitation of a mother dog's embrace. Together they dozed, old farmer and stray bound by exhaustion.
By late morning, Dr. Lawson's dusty Silverado rattled down the gravel drive. The vet, a rangy woman in her 40s, stepped into the kitchen with a stethoscope swinging like a pendulum keeping farm time. She inspected the dog, murmuring professional sympathies, and administered antibiotics, painkillers, IV fluids. "He's lucky you found him," she said. "Internal bleeding seems minimal, but infection's looming. Keep him hydrated, warm, quiet." Hap nodded, gaze fixed on the slow drip of saline into the dog's leg. Lawson gauged Hap's expression, equal parts worry and wonder, and touched his arm. "I'll check back tomorrow." When she left, the farmhouse resumed its sepulchral hush. Afternoon sun painted the counter in amber, the color of childhood harvests. Hap brewed another pot of coffee he'd likely forget to drink. The dog, he'd begun calling him Duke, unsure why, shifted, sighed. Hap remembered his father's words, "Land's only as good as the life it keeps alive." In 60 years he'd nurtured wheat, sorghum, and 3 kids. Now perhaps one more soul needed farming.
Night fell purple. Hap carried Duke to the porch rocker where moonlight spilled like buttermilk over plowed rows. Crickets sang requiems for lost summers. Duke's head rested on Hap's thigh, ears flicking at ghost sounds. Hap stroked coarse fur, noticing scars older than yesterday's wounds, evidence of a life spent on the losing end of trust.
He spoke softly about the wife he'd buried, the children who phoned but rarely visited, the barn owl that haunted the silo. Words uncorked years of silence until his throat knotted. Duke licked his calloused palm, and something inside the old man unclenched. Hours later, Hap dozed, chin to chest. Duke raised a feeble head, scanned the horizon as if standing watch, then settled. Dawn found them curled like parentheses around a sentence of fragile hope.
Over the next week, routine stitched itself from necessity. Dawn meds, midday water with a turkey baster, twilight wound checks. Duke's appetite stirred. Hap coaxed him with scrambled eggs, then slivers of ham. The dog ate like someone unsure when the banquet would vanish. Between treatments, they shuffled to the barn. Hap tinkered with his tractor while Duke lay on burlap sacks, nose twitching at alfalfa ghosts. A storm rolled in one afternoon, wind lashing silo roofs. Thunder cracked so close it rattled Hap's fillings. Duke lifted on shaky legs, pressed against Hap's calves, terrified. The old man, surprised, realized the dog trusted him enough to seek shelter not just from rain, but from memory. He knelt, wrapping both arms around the quaking body, and murmured nonsense until the storm trudged east, muttering into distance.
2 weeks out, Duke walked without wobbling. Hap's steps, by contrast, betrayed arthritic grudges. Yet each evening they patrolled fields together, leaning on opposite ends of the same invisible cane. One sunset, Duke bolted after a jackrabbit, only to collapse halfway, lungs clawing air. Hap fetched him, scolding gently. "You ain't ready for rabbit stew yet." He carried the 80-pound dog as if hefting decades of longing and set him near the porch heater. Later, nursing his own aching spine, Hap laughed at the absurdity. An octogenarian hauling a half-mended stray across acres, both too stubborn for common sense. That laughter, startled from cobwebbed corners of his chest, felt like spring plowing under winter stubble, turning grief into green possibility.
July baked the plains. Hap rigged a kiddie pool under the shade of the only cottonwood left standing. Duke splashed, tail finally unfurling into a full-throttle wag. The dog's coat, once grimy, now gleamed russet gold where sunlight kissed it. Neighbors passing on the county road slowed to wave at the spectacle. Grim Hap Whitaker actually smiling while a mutt cannonballed in knee-deep water. Word spread. Folks began dropping bags of feed, chew toys, even homemade biscuits shaped like paw prints. Hap accepted these gifts with shy gratitude, remembering how community once functioned before pride built fences higher than any cedar post. In giving Duke a second chance, he'd inadvertently reopen his porch to the entire township. August nights still carried storm threats, and one black ink sky delivered. Lightning split the western horizon, setting dry grass aglow. A distant barn, Old Man Keller's, caught fire. Sirens wailed. Hap watched from his porch, Duke pacing at his heels. Instinct flared inside the dog. He barked, ran to the truck, leapt into the bed, staring back. Hap understood. Keller's cattle might be trapped. Against sensibility, he grabbed bolt cutters and followed Duke through sodden darkness. At Keller's spread, flames licked rafters. The volunteer brigade had missed a side pen where calves bawled. Duke wriggled under fencing, nipped and nudged the calves toward a gap Hap carved with cutters. Smoke scorched lungs. Sparks singed Duke's coat. Yet they freed every last calf. When the roof collapsed moments later, Hap swore he saw Maggie's spirit running beside Duke in the orange glare.
Heroes earn scars. Duke's singed fur left patterns like lightning etched into earth. Hap treated burns with salve while humming the lullaby his wife once sang. The county newspaper snapped a photo. Weathered farmer cradling a wounded dog, both bathed in soft barn light. Headlines called them the Guardians of Keller Road. Hap pretended to hate the fuss, but his eyes shone whenever the clip surfaced. Donations flooded Keller's mailbox. He credited Hap and Duke, insisting they take half. Hap refused money, but accepted seeds. He would plant a wildflower meadow, he decided, in Maggie's honor. Duke now roamed leashless, greeting mail carriers and school bus kids, but never strayed farther than sight of the porch. Loyalty, once shattered, had been sought